Excellencies, distinguished delegates, a very good morning to you. Uh, as the Secretary General of BIMSTEC, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce the organization to you. Many of you would be aware of some dimensions of the organization, but let me provide you with some details which will set the context for your questions and also discussion by the panelists. As was pointed out by Ria, BIMSTEC is an intergovernmental organization which was initiated 26 years ago in 1997. It brings together 7 countries from Bay of Bengal region. The permanent secretariat of this organization is located in Dhaka. And in 2022, BIMSTEC Charter was signed and various areas of cooperation were reorganized in 7 broad sectors. Essentially, BIMSTEC aims at creating an enabling environment for rapid economic development through implementation of specific cooperation projects in the areas agreed for regional cooperation. Member states have designated a lead country for each of the 7 sectors. Bangladesh takes the lead in trade, investment and development sector with inclusion of blue economy as a subsector. Bhutan leads in environment and climate change with mountain economy as a subsector. India leads in security sector, which also includes energy security and disaster management. Then we have Myanmar leading in agriculture and food security. Nepal leads in people-to-people contacts, which includes culture, tourism, a conclave of think tanks, and even discussion on visa matters. Then we have Sri Lanka leading in science, technology, and innovation. This sector also includes health as a subsector. And finally, Thailand leads in connectivity. BIMSTEC has very well established core mechanisms and what we call sectoral mechanisms. In core mechanisms, we have summits and ministerial meetings. Summits have not been taking place regularly, but there is now an understanding that summits will take place every 2 years. Ministerial meetings involve meetings of foreign ministers of BIMSTEC countries, and they have been meeting regularly, at least once in a year. In sectoral mechanisms, we have again in different sectors ministerial meetings, senior officers meeting, and we have numerous working groups, engagement groups, expert groups working on different issues in each sector. BIMSTEC welcomes external partners. We have signed already MOUs with Asian Development Bank and IFPRI. We have already negotiated MOUs with 4 more organizations, the World Bank, the UNESCAP, UNODC, and UNOPS. Also, we are in discussion with concluding an MOU with a sister organization called IORA, Indian Ocean Rim Association. We are looking forward to working together with more international organizations and regional organizations if they share our goals and objectives. The doors of BIMSTEC are now open for observers and also new members. Our charter provides for specific criteria for accepting requests by other states or organizations as observers. And we are looking forward to working together with more countries. Let me conclude by making a case for BIMSTEC. The 7 member states of BIMSTEC are located in Bay of Bengal, which is a strategically important sub-region of Indian Ocean region. If we look at the total population of 7 BIMSTEC countries, it's 1.8 billion, which is over 22% of the global population. If we look at the GDP of 7 BIMSTEC countries, it's over 4 trillion, 4.5 trillion, which is again about 4.5% of the global GDP. BIMSTEC is a unique organization in the sense that it brings South Asia and Southeast Asia together. There are 5 countries from South Asia and 2 from Southeast Asia. BIMSTEC enjoys the requisite political support of member states. There is a renewed commitment to enhance regional cooperation, and we focus on technical and economic cooperation. So, as an organization, we stay away from divisive political issues. As I mentioned, we have very well established mechanisms to forge regional cooperation in different sectors and core mechanisms. We have clearly identified areas of cooperation with a unique arrangement of one member state leading in each sector. And as I mentioned, now BIMSTEC is open to more partnerships with external partners. Given the relevance of BIMSTEC for realizing the goals of security and development in Indo-Pacific region, I think the countries which are in the region are extra-regional players. When they are looking at taking initiatives, programs and projects for development or for security purposes in Indo-Pacific region, they should look at BIMSTEC as a partner, because we bring together 7 countries of Bay of Bengal and we provide a platform for regional cooperation. Let me conclude by saying that BIMSTEC has made a significant progress in creating institutional structures for regional cooperation. There is a huge untapped potential for expanding and deepening our cooperation. There is a renewed focus by all the member states to make BIMSTEC a success story. An eminent persons group has been set up to look at the entire structure of BIMSTEC, look at the areas of cooperation, and try to reimagine BIMSTEC, try to look at the future and what role BIMSTEC can play. The group has already met once in Dhaka, and next month it will be meeting again. So we are in the process of looking at how to revamp the secretariat and also how to reorganize our cooperation. So I can assure you that BIMSTEC is poised to have a much better future than its past. And as Secretary General, I am committed to work with the member states to make sure that BIMSTEC is able to achieve the goals set by them. Thank you, Ria.
Thank you, Ambassador Pandey, for setting the stage. And I will hang on to your words that BIMSTEC will have a better future than its past, and it's really heartening to see so many developments taking place as an institution. And also from the sectors that you mentioned, from 14 we have come down to 7 sectors, and there is a specific focus on developing each and every one of these sectors. And as you emphasize the importance of blue economy as well as mountain economy within the region, because this was recently emphasized by a foreign minister at the recent Indian Ocean Conference in Perth, that it's, when you think of Bay of Bengal, it's intuitive to think that it'll be a maritime economy, but there is a mountain economy which has substantial developmental potential in this region, and it's important that we develop both aspects of it simultaneously. So thank you, Ambassador Pandey, again for setting the stage for this discussion. May I now invite Mr. Shehan Semasinghe, the State Minister of Finance from Sri Lanka, to really comment on one of the important priority areas of BIMSTEC, which is trade and finance. We know that the BIMSTEC FTA has been under negotiation for several years, and yet, we are not able to conclude it. So could you give us a Sri Lankan perspective on what are the reservations towards achieving an FTA within the BIMSTEC region? And second, on the financing part, how do the different sectors and BIMSTEC as an institution ensure resilient and secure financing? Minister.
Good morning. Firstly, you brought up the point of FTAs. I think as BIMSTEC, we should take ASEAN and Europe as an example because there is a clear evidence of countries with similar economic and trading structures being able to expand trading relationships, and it's significant. But it would be good if BIMSTEC also could follow the same footpath. The reason is, as you mentioned, 20 years back, if I remember right, I think in 2004, there had been a framework agreement for a FTA which was agreed upon with all the member states. We have not made progress in operationalizing this framework, whereas several countries within the BIMSTEC groups have free trade agreements. For example, Sri Lanka recently signed the FTA with Thailand. Similarly, we are negotiating with India, and member states like Thailand has FTAs with Myanmar. So likewise, we have to expand our presence and go and enter into the FTA. So this is something which maybe in your next month's gathering, you'll have to talk about it and make sure that we finalize on the framework agreement we had. And secondly, you also brought on matters of financial requirement. Financing, especially for long-term investments, if you take sectors like energy, infrastructure, climate mitigation, adoption, has become a tremendously challenging effort. This is something which is being faced by almost every country. The main reason why I see is for this the present global context of higher interest rates. This has an impact on every country, and financing is challenging because of that. You cannot finance with your own budgets. So this is something which is being discussed at many forums. There is an opportunity to leverage private investment and capital flows within the region, which we have to make use of. For instance, in the energy sector, there is a scope for cross-border investment and trade. Bhutan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh already engage in significant trade in energy amongst themselves. So this is a practice what we have to expand to all the member states. Sri Lanka has a substantial renewable energy potential beyond traditional hydropower, and specifically wind and solar energy. Sri Lanka is encouraging regional investment in such power generation and in the discussion with India regarding electricity connectivity to enable trade in energy as well. So these are a few what Sri Lanka is planning and we are implementing. Well, in relation to climate change, global forums have been very vocal on this subject, but it is the time for us to ensure we materialize the outcomes of the discussions. So with this, I think I will stop. But financing will be challenging, and then securing the supply chains, ensuring there is a free flow of supply without disturbances, also would benefit every country and specifically for our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Semasinghe. If I want to build on your point on supply chains and bring in Mr. Sheikh Fazle Fahim, who is the chairman of the D8 Chamber of Commerce and Industry from Bangladesh. Mr. Fahim, the Bay of Bengal region, we see it as a bridge between Southeast Asia, yet supply chains in the region, as Mr. Semasinghe was also mentioning, they are not as developed. And despite the fact that over the years and like over a decade, in fact, several studies have identified its potential. So, could you comment on how the BIMSTEC states can develop resilient supply chain within the region with an aim to connect globally?
Thank you. For the region, trade and investment benefit would be maximized if we can get the value chain integration of the BIMSTEC countries. For that to establish a supply chain where we can look within the for domestic markets, the region and above and beyond is we would require standardization and harmonization of the products and services, harmonization of legislation policies, and the ease of border control for products and services to move faster. In addition, we can also look into how the processing of goods and services at the border control can be initiated prior to the goods and services arriving at the call of ports as well. But the supply chain, I would call it value chain integration for the global market. Just to give you an example, one of the product that Bangladesh does is jute. That product is exported to China and India and value added, and they go out to other markets. The same product is utilized in the aviation industry's paneling for the aircraft, as well as many of the high-end automobile makers. So when we are exporting the jute, it's around $600 per metric ton, but the paneling of the aviation industry goes up to $6,000. So the important thing we have to look into is for the bilateral trade not to have our goods and services from one country to the other, rather how that value chain can be added for high-end products so that the export earnings and diversification of our sectors can also be done. I'll end at that. Thank you.
If I may follow up, could you also give examples of some sectors for within the region where we can develop value chains? The high-end products are usually for the global value chain, right? For the regional development as well, if you could comment on that.
So some of the areas that we, especially post-COVID when the supply chain disruption happened and logistics cost went very high, we believe that for food security, value chain integration in the joint seed programs may be helpful. India and Bangladesh is doing some programs for joint seed programs, as well as you look at Bangladesh is the third largest freshwater fish producer and fourth largest vegetable producer. So that product is not supplied in the BIMSTEC region throughout. It has the potential for processing, agro-processing, and being sent to the other member countries of BIMSTEC as well. We have initiated Digital Bangladesh, for example, back in 2008. So it has created a backhaul for technology enabling across the sectors. India also has Digital India. I'm sure the other member countries have similar programs to get on the technology backbone, as well as moving towards automation and AI and cybersecurity and so forth. In addition to products and services, applied skills in the technology sectors has tremendous potential. If you look at cybersecurity globally, there is a shortage of cybersecurity experts. With 1.8 billion population, we have the potential for specialized skills, applied skills, to train our population and have them job placement throughout the world. It doesn't have to be migration, but it can be contractual work as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fahim. Dr. Wagli, if I may come to you next. Nepal is in a unique situation, and both Nepal and Bhutan, in fact, but they're landlocked countries, and therefore, their aspirations in the Bay of Bengal region are very different. So could you let us know on how does Nepal perceive BIMSTEC in terms of its foreign policy and strategic calculations? Like, what does it seek to get out of BIMSTEC as an institution?
Thank you, Ria. There's an odd curiosity around the year 1775, right? Nepal became an independent nation state in 1775. And The Wealth of Nations, the first edition of The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, was written in 1775. So I often make this connection to point out that Adam Smith had already talked about the importance of water carries way and the size of markets, right? And this is really the raison d'etre for Nepal to really seek bilateral, sub-regional, regional, and even global engagements. Wealth creation is a result of productivity gains acquired through specialization. Specialization happens through division of labor, and division of labor is limited by the extent of the market, right? So this is really the core principle. So we're small, we're poor, we're landlocked, so we want to extend the market. And this is where SAARC would have come in originally, because we are locked on three sides by India. So India is a very dominant neighbor. Relations with India are exceptionally important, bilateral engagements. The rest of SAARC is not so much. And this is where BBIN has come into the picture in recent years, right? Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal. There's a lot of activity there, movement there. Even though we don't have a formal secretariat, this is not as formal as either SAARC or BIMSTEC. There's a lot of on electricity trade, on building of sub-regional infrastructure, etc. Now, BIMSTEC I see as an extension of BBIN from Nepali perspective. And it's important for a few reasons, right? You are looking east. You're bringing in Myanmar and Thailand. And there's a certain degree of symmetry restored. India is so big, but when you're looking east, you're really focusing on the northeast of India. So you're restoring some symmetry and reciprocity there, right? You could start from West Bengal and then the 7 states of Northeast India, then Myanmar, then Thailand. So that corner of South Asia, we see as a big potential to really extend our trading ties, investment ties. And the sectors that are of keen interest to us are clean energy, tourism, and production sharing. Some discussion on supply chains has already come up. Thailand is the Detroit of Asia. India hasn't been able to do too well on, even though the first special economic zones was set up here in the 60s, there's a curious case study. I won't go into this in detail on why the electronic sector didn't take off here, but the auto sector has taken off. Thailand has done well in both, right? So we need to look at cases from Southeast Asia where maybe some of those lessons can be amenable to application in our part of the world. Now again, Nepal, clean energy is our big currency. We've generated about 3 gigawatts so far. India alone has 400 gigawatts plus, but more than 50% of that is from coal. And there is the complementarity, right? Where, if you look at the diversity in peak demand, in November in India, in Delhi, your peak demand starts at 7 o'clock in the evening, ends at 8 o'clock at night. In May, it starts at 8 o'clock and ends at midnight. So this, variation. We know from classic trade that it's differences in factory endowments that allows for trade and win-win outcomes. So on energy, there's a classic, and Bhutan is doing this to a degree, and Nepal has just entered into a 10,000 megawatt sort of deal over the next 25 years. Now we want to now not just bilateralize, but trilateralize this to involve Bangladesh. There's sufficient interest from Bangladesh to in fact build a hydropower plant in Nepal and then take a dedicated clean energy to displace dirty sources of fuel both in India and Bangladesh. But we need Indian cooperation for that, right? So this is where BBIN and BIMSTEC would come in and really facilitate these core trading interests. The other production sharing I mentioned, and tourism, of course. The Lumbini is in Nepal, the birthplace of Lord Buddha. And, from India to Myanmar to Thailand, it's the Buddhist ties that really resonate. And we need to do a lot more on this by building direct air connectivity, air links in these areas. So expanding markets, seeking dispute resolution mechanisms that are not bilateral in nature, exploiting economies of scale, primarily through energy, trading of clean energy, tourism, and regional production sharing, global value chains.
Thank you, Dr. Wagle, for those very specific sectors, and that provides me the perfect point to pivot to Ms. Lee, who's a policy analyst and OECD and one of the few and a sectoral expert in that. Ms. Lee, as Dr. Wagle also mentioned that BIMSTEC, Nepal and the whole BIMSTEC region, in fact, is vulnerable to climate change. And this is a region that needs investments in clean energy transition. So, could you comment on how BIMSTEC as an institution work with global institution and secure funds to become a growth hub, a green growth hub?
Thank you so much for the question. And let me just take opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Moon-Kyung Lee. I'm working at the OECD as a policy analyst. Specifically, I'm working for the team called Clean Energy Finance and Investment Mobilization Team. We're a quite unique team because we work exclusively with developing and emerging countries. We so far have 8 member countries that we work with. 5 of them is from the Asia, including Thailand, Vietnam, India, and sorry, I'm a little failing, Philippines. So what we do with these countries, we work with them directly, with specifically for the government, and try to understand what governments want as a priority to identify enabling conditions to be placed and how to mobilize the private finance for the needed area for clean energy transition. And we also work on industry decarbonization. Particularly, we're focusing at the moment on the clean hydrogen and have seen produce several analytical work to support the government to understand how to scale up the clean hydrogen production to decarbonize the hard-to-abate sector. So that's what we do. Specifically answering to Ria's question, I think we kind of touched up on a lot of interesting points, specifically regional energy cooperation. I think it's quite critical. But before we go in more delve into that point, I think we have to understand why the financing the clean energy or low carbon technologies in the emerging and developing countries are so difficult. So our analysis that we have been doing and also interaction that we had with the countries that we work with, we identify the cost of financing for the projects for renewable energy as well as some of the low carbon hydrogen development projects are quite expensive compared to developed countries. So just to give you the sense of how high it is for the solar panel, mainly in Europe is around 4 to 6 or 8% for the cost of financing. In the emerging and developing countries, the range is quite wide. It could be more than 10 to 25, or some countries with a severe political instability, it goes up to almost 38 to 40%. So this kinds of coming as a significant barrier for the investors when they are coming and interested in financing the low carbon asset projects. So another factor that I think is interesting for the cost of financing is for the even low carbon hydrogen, for example. It's an early stage technology that is still going through the maturity as well as market creation. And that for the hydrogen, I think it also going through same issue with cost of financing, despite the fact that many emerging and developing countries has more cheaper access to the renewable electricity production, but there's infrastructure gap in a way how to finance the enabling infrastructure, as well as how to tackle and create the enabling investment climate for the private sector to come in. And this kind of risk has to be tackled, and mainly is associated with perceived risk from the investors. And that is quite tied with the sector-specific risk, as well as policy and regulatory side issues. Also, the country-specific risk that coming from the political or sometimes the unclarity of government's long-term plan in terms of climate change, as well as how to mobilize renewable energy, for instance. And to enhance that climate, we at the OECD, we have been produced a lot of guidance specifically for the blended finance mobilization for clean energy projects, because blended finance actually can do critical role in terms of de-risk some of the risk factors I have just mentioned, and thereby attracting the private sector. However, what we have to be cautious in mind is that the blended finance has to be designed and tailored specifically for the projects and the risk that is present for the country, and as well as not to deter the private capital coming in. We often see a lot of clean energy projects are basically relying on public sector money. And this is not actually sustainable, because it has to be private sector that has to fill the big financing gap that emerging and developing countries need. And that being said, with enabling policy, with the government's will on clear objective, what should be done, the regional energy cooperation coming in place as a big unlocking solution for bring down the cost of financing by enabling the condition the investors are feeling comfortable, as well as some of the energy security that regional members are suffering. Also, you can identify more about renewable projects by scaling up the project pipeline, as well as harmonizing the investment and policy regulation in among the member countries coming as also a very successful factor. One give example is also we can look at ASEAN, also the African countries. Africa also have initiative called the African One Single Electricity Market, where they're boosting the energy trade among the member countries. This is coming as quite effective in a way, along with the free trade agreement that a continental level has achieved by harmonizing the investment climate, as well as sharing some of the interconnection and infrastructure among the member countries in the continents. They kind of give a confidence and clarity where the private sector can come in and contribute in terms of filling in the financing gap. So I think this is quite important factor that regional energy cooperation can unlock as a potential.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. And your point on blended finance is very important, because I think that's a mechanism that's being explored in different sectors also globally. And perhaps Ambassador Pandey, as you sign more MOUs with different institutions, this is something to look into, because this is, as Ms. Lee said, that this is important to also mobilize the private sector. Our last speaker for the panel is Mr. Shering Dorji, the director of CELIS. Am I pronouncing that right? Yes. From Bhutan. And he has done significant work on digital economy in the BIMSTEC region. So I really want to push him on that and ask, what are the key initiatives for the digital economy that will be useful for this region? And specifically in the context of Bhutan, what are the key challenges that, when it comes to Bhutan and adhering to this technology, especially in terms of employment and labor, and these kind of questions keep coming up when we talk about digital economy. So over to you.
Thank you. A very good morning to everyone in the room. Thank you for joining us for this early conversation. My name is Shering Dorji. I have been working in the telecom and IT sector in Bhutan for the last 24 years. I currently work full-time for a Swiss IT company called CELIS. And it has, in the region, it has two big offices. One is in Bhutan, and the other big office is in Bangladesh. So yeah, we represent the BIMSTEC region from that standpoint as well. Before going into the, before answering the specific question that Ria has asked me, I would like to first mention that BIMSTEC represents over 20% of the world's population, and we depend on the Himalayas, one of the most fragile ecosystems in the world, for our livelihood directly or indirectly. And as neighbors, it is very important for us to talk to each other, but at the same time, it is equally important for us to have an effective multilateral platform for all of us to come together and discuss issues of common concerns and interests. I think BIMSTEC provides that much needed platform. By fostering dialogue and cooperation, BIMSTEC can help address regional problems more effectively than individual countries could on their own. While there are many important activities and issues that BIMSTEC can take up, right now, given my own background, I would like to focus on the digital technology and the digital economy. As all of us are aware, I think today the world is more and more driven on all fronts, socially, economically, and even on the political aspects by the advances in the digital sector. And AI is a big topic that everyone discusses about right now. And whether the governments and the decision makers come and focus on this sector or not, I think the people are moving on and doing a lot of things in this sector. For example, in Bangladesh, the online freelancing is a very, very big thing. And even for a small country like Bhutan, with a population of just about 750,000, this has picked up. And just to cite a report that has come out of Bangladesh, there are about 500,000 active freelancers that are working regularly, and they are generating around $100 million annually. So with this backdrop, I think there are a lot of things that we could do, and with this perspective is based on the challenges that Bhutan faces. So firstly, there is a lot that the region can do in terms of investment in digital infrastructure. First and foremost, I think digital infrastructure is key. And for Bhutan, for instance, while the connectivity inside Bhutan is quite remarkably done, I would say, because we have been able to connect up to the village level through fiber optic cables using the OPGW, the ground wire of the electric transmission lines. We have a very good network of electric transmission lines, and the fiber optic cables are laid on that. But we are facing challenges on the international link, and there Bhutan is already in, at an advanced stage of discussion with Bangladesh and Bhutan, Bangladesh and India, to get additional connectivity from Bangladesh, through India. So this cooperation at a small level within BIMSTEC to improve digital infrastructure. While a lot of things are being done in the digital sector in all the countries, we should also be mindful that there are a lot of people in our region who are digitally illiterate, and the digital gap is a big issue that we should be mindful of, and providing digital literacy classes and awareness on the things that are happening, I think is very key. That is important for participation in democracy as well as participation in the digital economy. Okay, quickly. So I think the next one is entrepreneurship and innovation. I think there are a lot that we can do on that, a lot of exchanges that could take place. And development of AI talent is another one that should be focused upon. A lot of AI technologies are driven by companies from the West, but I think some more things can be done locally as well. So I feel that there are a lot of opportunities for BIMSTEC countries to cooperate on the digital sector. But at the same time, because I come from Bhutan and we work on the philosophy of cross-national happiness, which seeks to balance material development and mental well-being. So I feel that when we look at these technologies, we should not forget about environmental conservation and the preservation of our own cultural values, which has served us for over the centuries. Thank you, Ria.
Thank you, Mr. Dorji. Thank you, Mr. Dorji. I do have another round of questions, but I think I'll merge it with the questions with the audience in the interest of time. We need to have a hard stop at 8:45. So I request you all to please keep your questions short and please introduce yourself and the panelist your question is directed to. Does anyone have questions?
Yeah.
Sorry, 1 second. Ashirwad.
Yeah, I'm Kanagvali Suryanarayanan. I'm an advocate and a polo law scholar. So I would, there was a mention of climate issues, non-traditional security threats, and mountain economy. And I would say that BIMSTEC has a solution through the Himalayan Science Council in terms of regional governance and looking at these issues. And my question is, in terms of transboundary river management, would BIMSTEC be interested in engaging with ASEAN, because all of us are lower riparian states? So would there be an engagement in that area with BIMSTEC and ASEAN and all the lower riparian states?
Thank you, ma'am. Is your question for a specific panelist or generally?
The Secretary General can answer, or anybody can answer.
Okay. So can you take 2 more questions and then I'll come back to you? Ashirwad.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Ashirwad Dwivedi. I'm one of the Raisina Fellow this year. I have one question about the internal structure of BIMSTEC. I want to, any panelist can answer this. Do we need to reconsider the sector-based structure of BIMSTEC? Basically, because it has to be allocated on the basis of comparative advantage. Can we able to do that? That is one. The second question is about the external threat to BIMSTEC, which is China. So we want regional cooperation based on BIMSTEC, but China is also investing in all these countries simultaneously and has a much higher trade share. How are we planning to address that threat? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm a former Indian ambassador. My name is Venu Rajamani. I currently am here at this session representing the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, which is an international NGO engaged in conflict prevention, conflict mitigation, and conflict resolution. HD has taken up the Bay of Bengal as a priority area and has organized 3 rounds of Bay of Bengal Maritime Dialogue. The 4th one is scheduled in Colombo later this year. And as a result of this dialogue, in pursuit of the recommendations, we have worked on a set of guiding principles to govern interaction between naval enforcement, law enforcement vessels of the various countries of the region, as well as to deal with problems like illegal fishing and problems like terrorism and piracy. Tabletop exercise was organized with representatives of Navy and Coast Guard from the region, which has resulted in a set of guiding principles which is under discussion in the working group on maritime security of BIMSTEC currently. HD has also been supporting capacity building and support for research in areas like climate change, the impact of climate change and pollution within the Bay of Bengal. So my question is on the maritime dimension. I wonder if the SG can talk to us or enlighten us on the importance of the maritime dimension. And secondly, the distinguished member of parliament from Nepal mentioned regional dispute resolution mechanisms. I was wondering if he could elaborate more on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Venu. Are there any more questions? You can just one more. Okay, please go ahead.
BIMSTEC cooperation has a unique combination of countries with immense strategic relevance and resource potential. However, to unleash those resource potential and strategic relevance, definitely you need a financing plus element. So in this regard, how the cooperation, the MOUs with the global institutions can aid in harnessing this finance plus element, and how the technological advancements in individual countries can be integrated and can be targeted towards more of a collective goal. And my question is specifically to Dr. Wogley and Honorable SG.
Thank you. If I'm also distribute the questions, Ambassador Pandey, would you like to answer the first question and the third one? And the one, Ambassador Venu.
The question, I think there was a question about collaboration with ASEAN. So we have been in interaction with ASEAN Secretariat, and we are looking at learning from ASEAN's experience in forging cooperation in different areas. As regards the sector-based structure for cooperation, I think while there is a lead country for each of the 7 sectors, right, it doesn't mean that other countries don't contribute or they don't have the opportunity to do more work in that sector. It's just to facilitate initiatives in different sectors that we have, member states have decided on the concept of a lead state. But all the member states work together in each sector. So the cooperation remains at the level of all the states working together. There was one question which I would like to answer, which Venu posed about maritime domain. I think maritime security, there has been considerable progress in the discussions in the working group, and some of the initiatives Venu himself pointed out. Let me also mention here that there is an agreement already concluded on maritime transport cooperation. We are just waiting for the agreement to be adopted by the next summit. And already the standard operating procedures for implementation of this agreement are being discussed. So maritime transport is one domain where countries are very closely looking at, and it's something where very soon there should be progress. On technology, just there is already a technology transfer facility which is being set up in Colombo, and this facility should enable more and more cooperation in technology, including in digital technology domain too.
Thank you, Ambassador Pandey. Dr. Wagle?
Let me take three questions. On the allusion to China, the transboundary issues and the dispute settlement. On the China, I don't know if it was rightly phrased, but these regional blocks, what are they? Technically they're a grouping of countries that exchange preferences, right, for collaboration. Now, if it so happens that bilateral engagements are more preferential, then countries tend to turn away from regional arrangements to bilateral arrangements. So hence the urgency for regional blocks to be highly preferential, and for member states to really see the benefits. And that's what happened with SAARC. SAARC, there was a two-tier system of preferences for LDCs and non-LDCs, but bilateral arrangements tended to be much more beneficial. So Bhutan and India, Nepal and India, Bangladesh and India, Sri Lanka and India, or Sri Lanka and Pakistan, those bilateral ties ended up reaping much more benefits than what you would obtain through a regional bloc. So, if BIMSTEC, if members don't see an inherent interest through the regional arrangement, those exchanges of preferences or cooperation on specific projects, then you would turn to. So that's just a fact of trade. So it's not a question of threat or, in my opinion. On riparian issues, there's a lot to be learned in the Ganges, Brahmaputra river basins on how the Mekong collaboration has happened, right? Again, here, given the asymmetric presence, influence of India, you would need Indian cooperation. India has tended to prefer bilateral arrangements. Why regionalize or trilateralize these issues has been the conventional position. But if India could be nudged to take leadership to regionalize these issues, I think transboundary water issues can be governed much more effectively, as ASEAN has shown. But in the case of ASEAN, Thailand is the second largest economy there after Indonesia, but it's not as big and dominant as India is in ASEAN. So cooperation there has been possible. Although one has to point out that Laos, Laos is 5 or 6 million. You have Vietnam next door, which is 100 million. So there is some asymmetry there in terms of size and population, but not so much on per capita incomes. On dispute, I was basically referring to one of the wonderful institutional innovations of the WTO was the dispute settlement understanding, the agreement, right, the DSU, where a country like Vanuatu could bring a case against the United States and win, right? It would be impossible if those disputes were raised on a bilateral level. Smaller countries would be crushed. So it is the smaller countries of this world that need institutional protection, that need international organization, that need regional blocks to safeguard their interests. Big countries don't need that as much. And in that spirit, there could be, it's not in the sort of acrimonious sense that you pick a fight against larger countries, but there are common issues. Let's say Nepal and Bhutan, when it comes to GATT Article 5 and freedom of transit, often very salient. Mongolia and China, again, freedom of transit, right, GATT Article 5. So those issues could be resolved, could be pursued in a very gentlemanly fashion through these regional platforms, things that would not otherwise have been possible on a bilateral basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wagle. And with this, we have reached the end of our time. While my second question to the panelists was going to be on one specific suggestion that they can give us on taking BIMSTEC forward, but I think even from their remarks, we have, and I hope Ambassador Pandey will agree with me, that we have several good takeaways in terms of financing, in terms of clean energy, in terms of digital economy, building regional value chains, which sectors to focus on for BIMSTEC as an institution to develop, keeping the interest of the individual member countries in mind. Thank you all of us for joining us today this morning. We really benefited from your remarks, and we hope to host you again sometime. And thank you all of us for joining us for this early morning session and contributing to the discussion. Thank you.